There are phrases in human culture that linger across centuries, not because they were designed as scientific theorems or philosophical manifestos, but because they strike some deeper chord, words that seem to carry far more weight than their authors may have intended. Often these are drawn from sacred texts, ancient myths, or foundational epics. But occasionally, we encounter such words in unexpected places. In this case, they arrive not from Aristotle or Newton, but from Fergie, yes, Fergie of the Black Eyed Peas and solo fame, who once declared to the world, "My London Bridge keeps falling down." For many, this line is little more than a playful refrain woven into the thumping backdrop of a nightclub anthem. It belongs ostensibly to the realm of pop culture ephemera, a hook designed to burrow into the ear, repeated on dance floors with little reflection beyond the next bass drop. And yet, when one pauses to actually consider the words, they present themselves as an intellectual puzzle of startling complexity. They confront us with a riddle that has, in one form or another, plagued philosophers, scientists, and mathematicians since the dawn of recorded thought. What does it mean for something to keep falling down? The lyric is deceptively simple. My London Bridge, singular, personal, owned, keeps falling down. The grammar alone demands our attention. She is not speaking of bridges in the plural, collapsing one after the other like dominoes of stone and steel. She refers to one bridge, her bridge, and it keeps collapsing. The repetition implied by the phrase keeps falling immediately invokes the logic of infinity. To keep falling is to suggest an action without end, a cycle that refuses resolution. Here lies the first edge of the riddle. Are we to interpret the line as evidence of multiple distinct bridges, each succumbing to failure one by one? Or is this a vision of one bridge trapped in an infinite loop of collapse and renewal, unable ever to remain upright? Either reading suggests profound implications, the first pointing toward multiplicity, proliferation, and redundancy, the second to the haunting possibility of endless recurrence. Imagine for a moment that Fergie is speaking of multiple bridges. In this interpretation, each falling down event refers to a new structure, one more in a chain of doomed constructions. The implication is that bridges, plural, are fungible, disposable, replaced as quickly as they collapse, their individuality swallowed by an infinite sequence of failures. This is the world of multiplicity, of infinite supply and infinite waste. But is this truly what the grammar allows? The more precise reading, supported by subject-verb agreement, insists otherwise. She does not say, "My London bridges keep falling down." She says, "My London Bridge keeps falling down." One bridge, singular, recurring collapse. Thus we arrive at the second and, I argue, more compelling possibility. The bridge exists as a kind of eternal protagonist in a drama of infinite recurrence. Each time it falls, it must be restored, or perhaps never fully restored, always in a state of tumbling once more. This is not multiplicity, but singularity in an infinite loop, a paradoxical state that confronts us with the problem of potential infinity. Now one might be tempted to laugh. After all, what are we doing? Dissecting a pop lyric heard most often between sips of overpriced cocktails and under the flicker of strobe lights. And yet history is filled with such moments where the trivial, upon closer inspection, revealed the profound. Newton, legend has it, watched an apple fall and glimpsed the law of universal gravitation. Archimedes stepped into a bath and discovered the principle of displacement. Why should we not, in this cultural moment, take seriously the nightclub anthem as a lens into infinity? Indeed, there is something deliciously ironic in treating Fergie's lyric as a mystery worthy of scholarly debate. The humor is not in dismissing it as ridiculous, but in insisting on its importance, leaning so hard into the seriousness that the absurdity becomes part of the charm. If the universe can whisper its secrets through falling apples and overflowing bathtubs, perhaps it can also speak through the refrain of a pop song, played on repeat in the early 2000s. And so we arrive at the edge of revelation. This is not just a question of one bridge or many. It is a question that touches upon the deepest structures of time and reality. What does it mean for something to persist and collapse? What does it mean for an action to repeat without end? These are not idle musings. They are the very fabric of infinity, cloaked in the syntax of modern song. If the bridge falls once, the event is historical, finite, bounded. But if it keeps falling down, then the event is unmoored from chronology. It is no longer a single happening, but a law, a principle of recurrence. We are no longer talking about infrastructure. We are talking about cosmology. For the bridge becomes a metaphor for all structures of existence. Things that stand, collapse, are rebuilt, and collapse again. Cycles of stars forming and dying, of civilizations rising and falling, of universes perhaps expanding and contracting in endless rhythm. This is why we cannot dismiss the lyric, because hidden in the playful cadence of Fergie's voice lies a paradox that, once grasped, cannot be ungrasped. It is as though the line opens a crack in the nightclub's neon haze, through which we glimpse the infinite night of the cosmos beyond. The suspense is not artificial, it is real. For we stand on the threshold of answering whether the lyric encodes multiplicity or recurrence. And in so doing, we touch the very heart of what infinity means in human language. When Fergie proclaimed to the world that "My London Bridge keeps falling down," she did more than deliver a nightclub anthem. She, whether knowingly or not, offered a masterclass in how language itself encodes infinity. What appears to be a simple lyric is, upon closer inspection, a linguistic formula carrying the weight of centuries of logical paradoxes. Grammar, that invisible scaffolding of our thoughts, quietly becomes the doorway to infinity. Let us begin with the most basic, almost pedantic observation. My London Bridge is singular. The possessive determiner, my attachés not to bridges, plural, but to one bridge, unique, specific, hers. This is not a shopping cart filled with an assortment of bridges collapsing at will. It is one solitary bridge, the focus of Fergie's ownership and our inquiry. Now consider the verb. Keeps falling. Notice the S's. That lone letter is not decorative. It carries logical significance. In English, verbs conjugate differently depending on whether the subject is singular or plural. The bridges keep falling would be plural. The bridge keeps falling is singular. Fergie, intentionally or not, aligns herself with grammatical precision. One bridge, singular, is the subject of this infinite drama. This detail, often overlooked, eliminates the multiple bridges hypothesis. The grammar itself forbids it. Fergie's lyric is a contract, signed in subject-verb agreement, stating that we are dealing not with a proliferation of bridges, but with a single, recurring protagonist. This is not a franchise of collapsing structures. This is one bridge caught in a fate it cannot escape. The next phrase to dissect is, keeps falling down. In ordinary usage, keeps plus verbing signals repetition, continuity, an action that refuses to be contained. We say the dog keeps barking, the phone keeps ringing, the faucet keeps dripping. In each case, the phrase communicates not a single occurrence, but a persistent recurrence, often to the frustration of the speaker. In computational terms, this construction is the equivalent of a while loop. While conditions hold, the action continues. While the neighbor remains absent, the dog keeps barking. While someone insists on calling, the phone keeps ringing. While gravity exists and fate conspires, the bridge keeps falling down. The word keeps is a linguistic operator, one that turns a single verb into an infinite process. It encodes potential infinity into our everyday speech. This means that when Fergie utters keeps falling, she isn't merely describing a past collapse or a present tumble. She is opening the door to a process without end. The lyric refuses resolution. The bridge is not falling once. It is not fallen in the past. It is in a state of eternal recurrence, a collapse that renews itself with each utterance. Here, the fun begins. Because this tiny piece of grammar mirrors the way scientists model infinite processes. In physics, feedback loops describe systems where the output of one cycle becomes the input of the next. In computing, recursive algorithms repeat their steps indefinitely until a condition halts them. In chaos theory, recurrence is the heartbeat of strange attractors, systems that cycle endlessly without ever repeating in quite the same way. Consider the dripping faucet, a classic chaos experiment. A single droplet falls, then another, until the mind begins to perceive a rhythm, a pattern, even a cycle. The mathematics of this dripping system is governed by recurrence relations, equations that describe how one event leads to another in perpetuity. Now consider Fergie's construction. Keeps falling is the linguistic equivalent of a recurrence relation. Each fall implies another and another, stretching into the horizon of time. The bridge is no longer a physical structure. It is a system modeled by grammar, a cycle captured in a pop song hook. In this sense, Fergie's lyric stands shoulder to shoulder with the great models of science. Where physicists write equations, she sings them. Where mathematicians draw diagrams, she layers beats. What unites them is the same recognition. The world is not made of static events, but of cycles, loops, and infinite processes. Of course, we must pause here to appreciate the irony. Are we seriously suggesting that Fergie, in a moment of songwriting, cracked open one of philosophy's oldest paradoxes? In a way, yes. For centuries, thinkers have grappled with the problem of infinite regress. The question of what happens when an action depends on an endless sequence of prior actions. Aristotle mused on it. Aquinas feared it. Modern philosophers still wrestle with it. And here is Fergie, declaring from the center of a dance floor that her bridge keeps falling down. The humor is not in dismissing it, but in realizing that language cannot help but express these deep truths, even when the speaker's intent is playful or even suggestive. This is where the snark lives, not in mocking Fergie, but in marveling that the nightclub anthem contains the same paradox that has vexed philosophers since antiquity. What is infinite regress, if not something that keeps happening, forever pushed backward, never resolved? By wrapping it in a beat and a catchy chorus, Fergie may have unwittingly smuggled one of philosophy's most notorious riddles into the top 40 charts. So, let us take stock. The singular subject eliminates the multiple bridge hypothesis. The construction keeps falling encodes infinite recurrence. The grammar mirrors scientific models of feedback, recursion, and chaos. And the entire affair situates Fergie within the tradition of thinkers who grapple with the paradox of infinity. This is not trivial. It is not ridiculous. It is, in fact, an illustration of how language itself carries infinity within it, waiting to be noticed. Every time we use keeps plus verbing, we are speaking in loops, invoking processes that stretch beyond the finite into the infinite. That we usually deploy this construction for dripping faucets or barking dogs should not distract us from its philosophical significance. The bridge, then, is a symbol, a stand-in for all things that repeat, all systems that refuse resolution, all cycles that spin without end. Grammar has opened the gateway, and through it, we glimpse infinity, not as an abstract notion confined to dusty mathematics, but as a lived reality encoded in our speech, and yes, in our songs. When Fergie insists that her London Bridge keeps falling down, she is perhaps unwittingly echoing one of the most fundamental principles of physics: things fall. Collapse, decay, breakdown, these are not accidents of nature, but the default trajectory of the universe. To fall is to obey gravity. to yield to entropy, to march in step with the arrow of time. For all our attempts to build, sustain, and preserve, the cosmos leans always toward collapse. That Fergie chose collapse as the central verb of her refrain is more than lyrical flourish. It is a statement about the underlying mechanics of reality. Consider entropy, the measure of disorder. The second law of thermodynamics tells us that entropy in a closed system never decreases. Left to themselves, ordered systems dissolve into chaos. A house, if abandoned, will crumble. Ice melts into water. Water evaporates into vapor. Vapor disperses into atmosphere. Order requires effort, but disorder is free of charge. In this light, the lyric is almost prophetic. Keeps falling down is entropy's anthem. Fergie's bridge cannot help itself. It is a structure in time, and time's favorite pastime is dismantling structures. A nightclub anthem becomes a hymn to the second law of thermodynamics, sung beneath the glow of strobe lights and mirrored disco balls. Then there is gravity, the oldest and most familiar of forces. Bridges are designed to resist gravity, to span open spaces and support weight. But gravity is patient. Over time, supports weaken, joints loosen, materials fatigue, and the inevitable occurs, collapse. Gravity wins in the end. Whether we speak of bridges, buildings, or stars collapsing into black holes, gravity is the universal undertaker. When Fergie sings that her bridge keeps falling down, she speaks, however unintentionally, the language of astrophysics. Stars collapse when their fuel is spent. Galaxies merge under gravitational attraction. Even space itself may one day contract in a great collapse. The lyric is not just about bridges. It is about the inevitability of falling under the relentless pull of gravity. But if everything collapses, what then of recurrence? For the lyric insists not only on falling, but on keeping falling, implying not a single terminal collapse, but a cycle of rise and fall, fall and rise. Here the lyric brushes against one of the strangest and most fascinating ideas in science, Poincaré recurrence. Henri Poincaré, a French mathematician of the late 19th century, proved that in a closed system with finite energy, states will recur. Given infinite time, the system will pass arbitrarily close to any previous state. The molecules of air in this room may scatter to the corners, but eventually they will swirl back into something indistinguishable from their current arrangement. Stars may scatter across galaxies, but given sufficient time, they too will return. Fergie's bridge, then, may fall endlessly, but recurrence suggests it will also rise again, only to fall once more. The cycle is infinite. The bridge does not exist in linear time, where events occur once and never return, but in cyclical time, where collapse is always followed by restoration, and restoration by collapse. The lyric becomes a declaration of Poincaré recurrence disguised as pop. The natural world abounds with examples of cycles. Consider the oscillation of a pendulum, swinging back and forth in endless rhythm, or the orbit of planets around a star, tracing paths repeated over millennia. Even the humble heartbeat is a cycle of contraction and release, endlessly repeated until life itself gives way to entropy. Fergie's lyric joins this chorus of oscillation. The bridge falls, then rises, then falls again, tracing its own orbit between order and collapse. It is not static, but dynamic, not linear, but cyclic. And like all cycles, it hints at infinity, not infinity as an abstract number, but infinity as lived experience, the persistence of recurrence. Here, however, we encounter a paradox. For if the bridge keeps falling down, it must also at some point return to standing. Otherwise, there would be no bridge left to fall. Collapse presupposes structure. To fall repeatedly, the bridge must also be rebuilt repeatedly. And rebuilding requires energy. This is where thermodynamics re-enters the stage. Entropy dictates that collapse is natural, but rebuilding demands work, an external input of energy. The bridge cannot rebuild itself any more than a broken glass can reassemble on the kitchen floor. There must be some agent, some mechanism, some hidden source of energy, perpetually restoring the bridge to fall again. This is no different from the cycles of stars. Stars collapse under gravity, but nuclear fusion restores equilibrium until fuel is exhausted. On Earth, ecosystems collapse in forest fires only to rebuild through regrowth, fueled by sunlight. Civilization collapses and rebuilds, fueled by human effort and ambition. The lyric is, in fact, a microcosm of the universal truth. Collapse is inevitable, but so too is the effort to rebuild. Without that effort, there would be no cycle, only one final collapse. And now, the humor of the setting. Fergie's lyric does not echo from a lecture hall or observatory, but from a nightclub. What better metaphor for entropy at work? The night begins with ordered hair, crisp outfits, a pristine dance floor. Hours later, gravity has pulled everything downward. Sweat has undone the hair. Drinks have spilled on the outfits. The floor is littered with confetti and half-forgotten phones. The club itself has obeyed the second law, sliding from order into chaos. To say, "My London Bridge keeps falling down in this environment," is to capture the essence of entropy made visible in real time. The night itself is a bridge that keeps falling. Energy spent, order lost, collapse inevitable. By the time the lights come up, everything has succumbed. The metaphor becomes literal. The nightclub is a thermodynamic experiment, and Fergie is its prophet. All of this reveals the deeper truth behind the lyric. Collapse is not a special event, but the natural direction of time. Entropy increases, gravity pulls, cycles recur. To build is to defy time. To fall is to flow with it. That the lyric insists on continual falling is not pessimism, but accuracy. It is not that the bridge falls once and is gone. It is that the bridge belongs to time, and time guarantees collapse. And yet, the insistence that it keeps falling suggests something more, that the process is never finished. The bridge stands again, however briefly, to fall once more. Time itself becomes a cycle of construction and destruction, of entropy and energy, of fall and rise. When Fergie declares that her London Bridge keeps falling down, she unwittingly steps onto one of the most treacherous battlefields in philosophy and mathematics, the question of infinity. Few ideas have so captivated, tormented, and confounded the human mind as infinity. It is a concept that lives simultaneously in poetry and in physics, in theology, and in nightclub anthems. And here, nestled inside a 4-minute song, we encounter its specter once more. The first distinction we must draw is between potential infinity and actual infinity, a debate stretching back to Aristotle. Potential infinity refers to a process that could, in principle, go on forever. Counting numbers without end, for example, or the unending repetition of a collapse. Actual infinity, on the other hand, imagines infinity as a completed totality, an infinite set of numbers existing all at once, a timeless whole. Fergie's lyric does not, strictly speaking, commit to actual infinity. There is no claim that her bridge exists in a completed infinite state of collapse. Instead, the grammar encodes potential infinity. The phrase "keeps falling" signifies a process without end, an open horizon where each collapse is followed by the possibility of another, and another, and another. The bridge is not already infinitely fallen, nor is it infinitely standing. It is caught in a perpetual loop that has no terminus. This difference matters. Potential infinity is lived, experienced, unfolding in time. Actual infinity is static, abstract, residing in mathematics and metaphysics. When Fergie sings her refrain, she draws us into the lived experience of potential infinity, the unending sequence, the refusal of closure, the cycle that cannot be stopped. Aristotle, in his Physics, was wary of actual infinity, declaring it impossible in the natural world. He permitted potential infinity, processes that continue without end, but balked at the idea of infinity as a completed reality. Centuries later, Georg Cantor would defy this caution, developing set theory and proving that infinities come in different sizes. For Cantor, infinity was not merely a process, but a hierarchy of actual totalities, from the countable infinity of natural numbers to the uncountable infinity of the continuum. What does this have to do with Fergie? Quite a lot, if we are willing to take her grammar seriously. Her lyric situates itself closer to Aristotle than to Cantor. Infinity here is potential, unfolding in time, not an already completed set, but by insisting on the endlessness of collapse, by declaring that the bridge keeps falling, she gestures toward Cantor's insight that infinity need not be distant abstraction. It can emerge from the simplest operations of thought and language. The reference to London Bridge, a proper noun tied to a concrete location, makes this all the more provocative. Cantor's infinities were born of mathematics, Hilbert illustrated them with a hypothetical hotel boasting an infinite number of rooms. Fergie anchors her infinity not in mathematics or hypotheticals, but in cultural geography. Her infinity is not made of numbers, but of collapses. In this way, her lyric universalizes infinity, showing that it need not belong solely to the chalkboard, but can emerge from the nightclub and the dance floor. Let us pause on Hilbert's hotel, that famous thought experiment. Imagine a hotel with infinitely many rooms, all occupied, and yet still able to accommodate new guests by shifting each occupant to the next room. This paradox reveals the strange logic of actual infinity. Now imagine Fergie's bridge as Hilbert's hotel in disguise. Each collapse is a guest checking in. No matter how many collapses occur, another can always be accommodated. The bridge may be full of collapses, but it keeps falling, allowing yet another. The lyric echoes Hilbert's insight. Infinity is not intuitive. It strains against our sense of completion. But through grammar, through that tiny construction, keeps falling. We enact the same paradox, the same strangeness of endless repetition. The debate is not confined to grammar or mathematics. In cosmology, infinity lurks at every corner. Is the universe finite or infinite? Did it have a beginning, or has it existed eternally? Does time stretch forward without end, or is it bounded by a heat death? Some models of the cosmos even propose cyclic universes, eternally expanding and contracting, collapsing and rebuilding, an echo of Fergie's bridge on a cosmic scale. If Fergie's lyric encodes potential infinity, it aligns with the cosmological view that time itself may host unending sequences of events. Just as her bridge collapses endlessly, so too might universes rise and fall in infinite succession. To sing of a bridge that keeps falling is, in miniature, to sing of cosmology, of the possibility that existence itself is a rhythm of collapse and return. Human cultures have always been drawn to cycles. Ancient myths speak of eternal return, the Ouroboros, the snake devouring its tail, the Hindu concept of samsara, the endless wheel of birth, death, and rebirth, the Stoic belief in cosmic conflagration and renewal. Even modern science, with its talk of oscillations, orbits, and recurrences, cannot escape the allure of cycles. Fergie's lyric belongs to this tradition, whether she intended it or not. To say that something keeps falling is to deny finality. There is always another round, another collapse, another return. The bridge becomes an emblem of eternal return, a structure fated not to end, but to recur endlessly. And we, listening on the dance floor or in the quiet of analysis, find ourselves caught in that fascination once again. And here is where we lean into the irony. Fergie, delivering her hook with nightclub swagger, has stumbled into the same paradox that tormented Aristotle, enchanted Cantor, and confounded cosmologists. With nightclub-level clarity, She has captured the human inability to resist grappling with infinity. We laugh, perhaps, at the seriousness of it all, but the laughter is uneasy because we know it is true. Infinity is not something we can ignore. It insists on being considered. It returns in our myths, our mathematics, our cosmologies, and now in our pop songs. The fact that Fergie packaged it in a dance anthem only underscores its inescapability. Infinity does not care whether it appears in a theorem or a lyric. It is everywhere, pressing itself upon us. At last, we arrive at the verdict. After grammar and physics, after cycles and cosmology, we are prepared to answer the riddle that has haunted our investigation from the very beginning. When Fergie sings, "My London Bridge keeps falling down," does she describe multiple bridges, collapsing in sequence like an endless row of dominoes? Or does she sing of a single bridge, forever caught in an infinite loop of collapse and return? The evidence is decisive. The grammar, as we have seen, is unyielding. Bridge, singular. The verb, conjugated with its definitive S, ties the fate of collapse to one subject and one subject alone. The physics of falling supports this reading. Entropy and gravity do not discriminate among multiple bridges, but act universally upon structures, making collapse a repeating certainty. And the philosophy of infinity affirms the conclusion. The lyric encodes potential infinity, not by multiplying bridges, but by repeating one bridge's endless downfall. Thus, the riddle resolves. Fergie is not describing a string of disposable bridges. She is singing of one bridge, a singular emblem, her London Bridge, that collapses endlessly, embodying the eternal recurrence of falling. Now, some may dismiss this as trivial. It is, after all, a nightclub song, written for movement on the dance floor rather than reflection in the seminar room. But to dismiss it is to miss the larger point. This lyric reveals how infinity is not confined to equations, chalkboards, or telescopes. Infinity lurks in the very structure of ordinary speech. The moment we say something keeps happening, we have stepped across the boundary from the finite into the infinite. This is the real power of the lyric. It democratizes infinity. Where philosophers wring their hands and mathematicians devise elaborate theorems, Fergie delivers it in 3 simple words. Keeps falling down. The nightclub becomes a site of metaphysics, the pop chorus a proof of recurrence. This is not trivialization, it is revelation. Infinity belongs not only to scholars, but to all of us, embedded in our grammar, waiting to be recognized. It also reveals something startling about cultural artifacts themselves. Popular songs, films, and jokes, all of them, if examined carefully, carry echoes of the infinite. Consider how often we speak of things that never end, go on forever, or always happen. These phrases slip from our lips without thought, and yet they summon infinity as casually as one might order a drink. Fergie's lyric is simply the most striking example because she has tethered the infinite to something as concrete as a bridge, and then set it dancing. If a single bridge can encode infinity, then the implications stretch to the cosmos itself. Stars collapse and reform, galaxies collide and reform, universes expand and perhaps contract. Everywhere, cycles reveal themselves, collapse and return, fall and rise, entropy and renewal. The cosmos is one vast bridge that keeps falling down. The metaphor is profound. Nothing is permanent. Every structure, whether a stone bridge, a star, or a civilization, collapses in time. But collapse is never the final word. Just as Fergie's lyric insists on recurrence, the universe itself insists on cycles. Structures dissolve, but the process continues, unending. The falling of the bridge is not tragedy, but rhythm, not finality, but recurrence. In this light, the lyric becomes a cosmic metaphor, a reminder that permanence is an illusion and infinity is the true fabric of reality. To dance to Fergie's refrain is, unknowingly, to participate in a ritual of cosmic truth, the celebration of cycles, the acceptance of recurrence, the acknowledgement that nothing stands forever, but nothing is truly lost either. We return, then, to the lyric itself. My London bridge keeps falling down. It is more than a pop hook. It is a formula of infinity, a grammar of recurrence, a scientific proof disguised as song. It tells us that infinity is not abstract, not distant, but present in the very words we speak and sing. Each time the lyric repeats, it performs the very process it describes. It keeps falling, keeps returning, keeps collapsing into meaning. This is the ultimate irony. The lyric is not just about infinity, it enacts infinity. The repetition of the chorus itself is an infinite regress, a loop that continues as long as the song plays, and perhaps longer, echoing in memory, surfacing in thought, reappearing in culture. The bridge keeps falling, and the lyric itself keeps falling with it, refusing to end. And so we conclude, not with mockery, but with awe. For who could have predicted that a nightclub anthem would contain the key to understanding eternity? Who would have thought that in the glow of neon lights, amid the bass and the sweat of the dance floor, we would glimpse the structure of infinity itself? There is a dry humor in this, to be sure. Philosophers spend lifetimes debating infinity, and mathematicians sacrifice sleep to its paradoxes. Yet Fergie, with the clarity of pop, simply sings it. She has distilled one of humanity's most intractable dilemmas into a chorus that anyone can chant at 2 a.m. And in doing so, she has proven a point more profound than she could have intended. Infinity is not out there. It is right here, in our speech, our songs, our dances. So let us leave the nightclub half amused and half awed. Half amused that we have spent so much time treating a pop lyric as philosophy. Half awed that it truly deserves it. For in the endless falling of one bridge, we have glimpsed the rhythm of the cosmos, the inevitability of recurrence, and the infinity written into every word we speak. My London bridge keeps falling down. At once absurd and profound, comic and cosmic, It stands as proof that eternity is never far away. Sometimes it hides in a book, sometimes in a theorem, and sometimes improbably in a nightclub anthem.